came out. It's a collaborative poem I wrote with Vincent Katz during the pandemic. It's called A Possible Epic of Care. I don't know if you can see it. I don't see myself, so I'm not sure if you can see anything else.
See it. We see it.
Yeah, it was a way to talk to each other. It started as a correspondence, and then it had some poetic twists in there, and we followed it by both a journal of daily activities, and it became a poem somewhere around a few letters into it. So it's really a terrific thing. But I can't read from it because I can't remember who wrote what, and which is great. But oh yeah, sure. Book title in chat. What is chat? Oh, there's
I'm going to go ahead and type
it
right there. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I got it. A possible epic of care. No, I love Prague. Is everybody in Prague in there? In your oh no, people are from everywhere, right?
We've got
Argentina.
3 continents.
Oh, fantastic. What time is it in Argentina?
It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow. Okay, well, that's comfortable. All right, well, it's good to meet you all. Maybe we'll talk afterwards, and definitely about that. So I was just going to read some poems from a new manuscript that I have no idea. Well, I guess I miss the winter of Francois Villon. Those really the Middle Ages ice age that happened around 1500 and something, 1400 and something. And there was a lot of snow and ice, and you couldn't go out. And that's where Villon wrote his wonderful poem. Je suis François Villon, né à Pontoise. François Villon, born in Pontoise in 1465. And if you knew what's good for you, you wouldn't go out. You'd stay in, more or less. So because of that type, I don't know. I was born in Romania, so I've been having some. And it's close to my birthday, and there's always a lot of snow, and winter is my favorite season. So I don't know what happened to winter. I keep asking, where's the snow? So this one is called Everything Was the Wrong Size. Flashback to commie market beige and blue shirts and hats. What tailors we had then. All our new shoes needed iron horseshoes for mud and snow. What mud we had. What snow. The worser the things, so much better we were then. We wore each other's clothes. Girls borrowed each other's dresses, and boys wore their brothers' pants. It was like we lived in our friends and cousins. We were so much closer then. So followed by two Villonesque, Francois Villonesque poems. Also taken from the real life and nostalgia of these non-winters. He's a Bulgarian. I'm a Turk. And that pot-bellied stove holds our circle by the feet, covered in 7 pairs of dirty socks, just like our unwashed bodies since the spring. Bald cotton in our hairy pits, funny old hats piled on our heads, palimpsest of silk, cotton, and sandpaper underwear, and file down teeth, razor cold cuts into skin beneath bony ribs, what few remain. Clank, brr, brr, brr. A knot of oak pops frozen blizzard wing, cinder drags in tow. Oh, nuclear winter. Oh, Francois Villon, where did all the naked people go? And a poem from my part of the world. It's called "The AI is the Biggest Vampire." Which is true. It's stealing everything we do and turns it into a paste of words, that are a lot less than what we do. AI is the biggest vampire. Eat your heart out, Nosferatu. Suck this, Dracula. Shoo bats from our necks. Away with all you gigolos. Silence your midnight choir. We have no need of you. we have the biggest and best bloodsucker, the AI vampire. I have a lot of ideas, thoughts about this, and um, about this business because it's obsessing everyone in America. I don't know if it's become a full obsession in Europe. I know that there are some regulations passed about artificial intelligence in Europe by the EU, but I don't totally know what that means or like it. But this is called posted in Windows. It takes 10 dogs to clone your beloved Pooch Ondine. First, you must skin them to make furry muffs for the staff. Then you must dissolve tissue from their eyes to make eyes. We tell you this so you can think before you start to clone Ondine. We give you a day to let this sink, signed by the staff of Clone Your Own Dog, Inc. And this two more works from this age of techno-feudalism. They're called Baudelairesques, and one is the Clercaverse. Timing is important to our secular hive because we all often believe the lie that an angel with a stopwatch hovers above each one of us, keeping time until we die. Then the angel moves on to the dead's X, rewarded with a better timepiece, maybe a Rolex, containing more time because widowed humans live longer, and in the future people live longer and longer until the bored angels incarnate into the humans who died on their watch. These humans are immortal. Above our secular hive lives nobody now, emptied of angels. The timepieces run on sand, keeping time for ex-angels trying to believe that their old forms still hold them in hand. This is an exercise also, as you can tell, in a kind of a little formal exercise. I'm not quite sure what the form was. And thank you for being here. We are all connected, even with the screen between us, the dressing screen. You are changing behind into a dragon. How did the avant-garde end up in the past? It fell in love with the enemy, and when it shared its info with the mainstream, it sank into its empty gas balloons, weighed with the lead of regret. I think this was the beginning of one poem and the end of another. But these are new works, so I'll never know. So, oh yes, and another part of our world's constant meditation called the uses of the Berlin Wall. Everyone agrees that the old Berlin Wall was a congealed mass of putrefied vomit, and it stank to heaven. Good riddance. And yet we must erect a new Berlin Wall between the humans and the deep fakes they make out of the uncanny valley ad Astram. The old wall exacted a great price for blue jeans, used to practice je m'en fous, all exertion, no choice. I don't love shopping, it's exhausting. Nostalgia imbued deep fakes confuse the animal hunting for something perilous. A purple language meet in its vowels. And the poem for you Europeans there, called Everything Turns into a Museum. If I can find the end of it. Oh, I see. You'll have to forgive me 1 second here. Okay. Yes, everything turns into a museum. The more heinous the history, the more popular the museum. Take Europe, for example. That stuff is all shrunken heads, curated to read like the newspaper. the smoked ham of ethnic cuisine. Next visit, we must take our country cousins and leave them in the vitrines. The next generation can learn something. Okay. This is somewhat random because this office is a complete mess. Okay. What gives? You can write poetry for 60 years, publish and exhibit yourself shamelessly for 50. Words are the money of your face denomination. The minute you see another as yourself, they become as boring as yourself. The random street crazy who shouts, everything goes out the window. A suburban punk raised on video games shoots kids in school. What country should we bomb? Shouts Smokey. The more you give them, the more they fuck it up. These odd people from the past, fuzzy in the city, teach arrogance, humility, and interdisciplinary wisdom. Are you the funny poet who's written more serious lines than all the tragic puffed charlatans eating lunch on Zoom? The internet is a loaded gun in the hands of a 3-year-old. I remember the old vertigo of syntax, desperado struggle with bad toilet training, like the crawl under the news. Take black holes seriously. We have too many feelings and not enough memory. Everybody's sad. The rest is advertising. And retouching. That's your last work, then we can talk about everything. Retouching. This, my parents are photographers. This comes directly from the darkroom. Retouching. Several times my mother mentioned retouching photographs to hide what in the people of those days? Wrinkles, black eyes, fake smiles to make them look more real. Little eyes are swimming in fat to make them prettier. Most people I see in airports need retouching. They are grotesque. Photoshop, pencil, is romantic, idealized, fuzzy, kitsch, Vaseline on the lens. This is why my mother refused to see anything for long without rose-colored glasses. She'd rather take the lie that was so obvious and sad to me in my childhood and youth. I turned into an ultra-realist, a super-realist, a satirist, even as the pink glass shattered and entered her pupils, where it bled the light of a reproach. So anyway, these are new works about everything. See what these chats are saying. Oh my goodness, a lot of chats here. Okay, well, you can tell what my concerns are these days with artificial intelligence, some neuroscience, all the sort of discussed issues, but they're not, they don't lend themselves very well to lyrical, to poetry, but they're certainly a big concern. They have to. You have to swallow it. So, I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts about? I have. There is a database actually that you can put your name and your work in and see if any AI has used your work for training. And I did that, and it turns out about 6 of my books were used, for it. I wouldn't recognize it if I knew it, but if I don't even know which AI it is, but I know that the Authors Guild and PN have now sued some AI companies for using their work in training AI. So.
Where can we find some of these poems that you read? Where can we find them printed?
Well, at the moment, they're not printed anywhere because well, they will be eventually in a book this year, I hope. But and it's occasionally in magazines. There is a good journal here called Maintenon that I like to, publish it's published in New York, and it's a magazine of somewhat surrealist essays and poetry. So.
Great. Can you say the title again, please?
Maintenant. It's a French for now. Maintenant.
Oh, Maintenant. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Which was actually the name of a magazine that Mina Loy's good friend who drowned, Oscar Wilde's child, published in Paris in the 1930s. I can't remember his name now.
Oh, Andrei, that makes me want to, well, first of all, thank you for coming, and thank you, Lucian, for making this possible. It's been at least 20 years, so you probably don't remember me. We were once upon a time in the transcontinental reading for Kenneth Koch, and you kindly gave me a poem called Tristan Zara for Viz. I don't know if you remember this book that you were in eons ago, but it makes me really happy in this poem that I published of yours that you were conducting a study on the liberatory intensity of laughter, and you went into some technologies like the silent movies that Charlie Chaplin were in, and it makes me very happy today, in particular on this day, where I can barely say the word or the phrase AI without just freezing, because I'm still teaching. So I know that my labor is just going into a little gutter of pointlessness, grading papers that I know are being written by bots. But it does feel like laughter is the way to respond, and that data making like David Byrne reappropriating, I guess, the data has since stopped making sense, Zimbra and so forth. Just when you're confronted with a technology so devastating as we were in World War I, you have to come up with something like data, and you're just the thing I needed today. Your data presence. I love Vincent Katz. He's a buddy of mine who was published in my Viz as well. But I just want to say, are you thinking? I don't know, maybe not thinking, but maybe you can't help but be Dadaist. But are you kind of responding with your characteristic humor to this as a strategy? That's a bad question, but
no, it's not. I wrote a book. It's an essay, really, called "The Post-Human Dada Guide," and this was before the release of ChatGPT and all the AIs for everyone who wants to use it. But I think that still laughter and paradox and not making sense is about the only way to use words now, when a robot can make such coherent sentences and do so much research within languages, not many languages. And see patterns that we are not seeing. So, we are in a kind of competition, in a language competition, and I think that poetry that makes the robots go into corners where it can get out of, I think is
Samuel, I just ordered you Burger King.
What's that?
Speaking of not making sense,
Right.
that was great.
Yeah, Burger King. You can definitely.
Sorry, I didn't realize
it's
that
okay.
my thing was on. I was talking to my son.
So are we living in a post-human age? Like, I'm used to post-modern, but post-human, really?
Well, what I meant by post-human then is I thought we were already living there because we are depending on so many wires hanging from our bodies. You have your phone and it's not literally a wire, but Wi-Fi, and then you have your computer and you have all your electronics and so on, and they've become almost, we didn't feel when they became necessary and a part of our bodies. And so I think my phone is a part of my body. I can, I look for the iPhone, and the sort of whenever I'm in a strange place, I think, well, where is my iPhone? Not because I'm expecting any great message, but because it seems to be a part of the brain. Now, we are the ones thinking these things up, but then if they start thinking for themselves, there's a problem. And this is, yeah.
I keep wondering if our brains are going to atrophy. Like I was always bad at reading maps in the first place, but now I don't even have to. I just look at my iPhone and set it on an app, you know? So are our brains going to get even worse at reading maps? Are we going to lose certain skills because we become so dependent on this technology?
Well, not if you don't lose your phone. You, I mean, if you remember your phone number is a big deal, you know, but I don't even remember that. You know, I have to Google everything. And now with the AI lies a lot, by the way. You know, if you can get in a conversation with it, and it sounds very authoritative and believable, and this is a problem probably for teachers, and because it's convincing, but it makes things up. Nobody knows how they do this. My son is a chip designer. He designs microprocessors for a big company, and they work with AI, and none of them know exactly how it does what it does. They know the result, and they know what the question is, and the more sophisticated the question, the better the AI. You know, the more you can train it. He asked the AI to make a song, to make music about what it's like when the singularity becomes conscious, and it made this really creepy song. I mean, it's really creepy instrumental. I can mail it to everybody. This was the latest version of something released by Google.
On another topic, maybe I'll jump in here for a second. I was going to mention the poems about Romania that you talked about, and how those just remind me of stories that I heard when I was a young girl in Hungary growing up. And I just kind of wanted to say that those were really wonderful descriptions and beautiful language there. That's what I really actually got into. I probably the most.
Yeah, Hungarian was my first language because I spoke it with my grandmother. And
Beszél magyarul?
yeah, I don't speak it anymore. You know, it's a very hard language to relearn, or even impossible to learn. But it feels very warm. And I'm in Hungary. I feel like I'm in a warm bath. You know, I don't know what people are saying, but it feels extremely familiar. So my other language was German, actually, which I spoke with my mother and Fräulein that took care of me. And then I spoke Romanian, which is another friend down the street. But I didn't know they were different languages because I thought this is how you speak with my mother and the Fräulein, and this is how you speak to Peter down the street. So we spoke Hungarian, and this is how you spoke to Jon. And then when I went to school, my brain froze for a while because I was told they were different languages and they have to be spoken in different ways, you know, and have a different literature and a different textual text. Right. But yeah, I go back to Romania now quite a bit. So I've picked up the language again, the Romanian, so I can, you know, write some primitive things.
And what language do you think and dream in, Andrei?
English.
Only.
I've been here since, I was here since, you know, I was 19 years old, you know, 1966. So, you know, I mean, and I didn't speak Romanian for some 15 years because I was and I couldn't go back. So I sort of abandoned it. And then I was sent by radio and television stations to Romania to cover the events there in 1989. And then I've gone back every year and I've picked it back up. Yeah.
And what do you think?
That is absolutely fantastic. So where are you living now, and why did you have to leave Romania, if I might ask?
Well, I live in Brooklyn now, but I didn't have to leave. You know, I was happy to leave because at the time, the dictator Ceausescu had a dirty deal going with Israel and with West Germany. And he was selling Romanian Jews to Israel. I mean, selling, or you can say Israel bought our freedom. And the West Germans also, paid for ethnic Germans to be able to leave Romania, and or they traded them. It wasn't just strictly cash. There were also like commodities like pigs, cattle, grain. So I was able to leave, which, with my mother, and when I was 19 years old, and that was because of this deal, which was kept under wraps for a long time until, there's a book about it now. So the price was $2,000 in cash, and if you went to high school, and $4,000 if you went to college. So my mother and I cost about $4,000, but we never went to Israel. So, I probably owe the state of Israel with interests of millions of dollars, but I paid it in taxes in the U.S.
And Andrei, how many years did it take in America before you really felt capable of commanding the language enough to write effectively?
About 5 minutes. I was 19 and I had things to say to girls, and so I learned it real fast. Or the spoken language, writing or something else. Well, started with that came reading as well.
Because I think,
but
I mean, there's very few poets or writers who have been able to master another language. I'm thinking of Nabokov and Joseph Conrad strike me as two really powerful examples of that, but you're a third.
Well, Brodsky wrote after he left, Russia. He wrote in English quite a few poems, but they're not as as good as his Russian work. I mean, in Russian language, he was very much at home in, and they also have this incredible resonance and form. In English, he relaxed, and it wasn't so interesting. But I know now there's a large, there's a lot of work written in English by people from the former British colonies. That's very important, and it's English. So I mean the language gets renewed by these things, by these writers. So. I mean, in a way, a lot of the people in the British colonies spoke English in school, so their English is pretty much maybe not even a second language, but maybe a first.
I was going to say, to me, it feels like you have multiple languages, Dada being one of them in some ways. Surrealism. It's not just the known languages, the languages of the unconscious. But speaking of languages and conversation, you started this conversation out by saying you wouldn't read from A Possible Epic of Care, this collaboration with Vincent Katz, whom I love, because you can't tell who wrote what. And it, to me, that kind of it kind of reminds me of Exquisite Corpses, right? When you create something that almost in a surreal way melds with the mind of the person with whom you're creating it. You can't tell who made what, which is fascinating to me. And it seems a part of what was happening in your neck of the woods in New York in the 60s, all the collaborations happening between Waldman and Berrigan and all those guys, and Katz and Waldman lately, and now you and Katz. And even if you won't read from that, which I hope you will, can you talk to us a little bit about the process of having a conversation as a long poem, especially with that particular poet?
Well, I'm an inveterate collaborator. I collaborated from the 60s when I collaborated with some of the poets in Dick Gallup and Ted Berrigan, and and then later I collaborated with students and with people in bars, and we wrote on napkins. And the collaboration was an ongoing poetry. I mean, I wish I had them all, and I wish there was a good anthology of Exquisite Corpses or of collaborations. But I still have quite a few of them, and maybe sometime. But there are different ways of collaborating, of course. But what I remember when I first started was the idea was that if it was an exquisite corpse, is that you wrote a line and then you folded the paper and you left the word for the next person. The next person would continue to do that, and any number could play. And when you unfolded it, you had an X-ray of the collective mind of the people who collaborated. So it was always very interesting to see what, and how quickly people fell into the same wave, somehow, and that every poet tried to up the ante and raise the bar, because if somebody wrote a great line, you just had to write a line that was better. That was even greater, and so that was fun, So, but then what we did with Vincent, we did this by email because we didn't see each other. He was I was in Brooklyn and he was somewhere in Maine, and so he listened to quite a bit of music, and so a lot of his entries are about music he's listening to and books he's reading, and mine are about my walks and the books I was reading too. But then it became, it became more than a conversation. We knew we were inside a poem. And Vincent has been thinking a lot about this idea of epic because he's been teaching it, and but obviously we couldn't write an epic of heroes or military doings, but or any other kind of epic. So we thought in this particular age of COVID, we would write an epic of care, because our mothers are both in their 90s. 90, mine was 96. She passed away, but then Vincent's mother is still alive, Ada, and she's also in her, late 90s, and they were since trying to because they're not biographies of our mothers, but they were always present, as a concern, and this. So we called it an epic of care because it seemed to be a time when everybody had to take care of everybody else, because suddenly the world got smaller and we were all sick.
I'm sorry about your mother.
Well, that was
a beautiful story. I mean, I remember speaking of, I guess, Eastern European poets, Charles Simic once said that he talked about the epic as being about the clashing of gods and mortals, Homer and Sappho being about lyrics and, very personal. And he was trying to counterpose those two. But what you say about an epic of care seems to sort of change the whole definition of the epic, so that it's just like a very long lyric in that definition.
Right. Well, it's also divided into, but Vincent did this into cantos, which was really sort of a nod to Ezra Pound, and who was nodding to Dante's. We're not, in the formal sense, we were trying to, but you can't write now about clashes of gods or armies or things of that nature, which is which are very different.
I don't want to dominate. I just want to say one last thing. Your anthology, I love your idea of having an anthology of collaborations, but was it called 4 Walls, 8 Windows?
Yeah, that was
mine. And that really influenced me. And I think that having a collective mind of those kind of poets in the late 80s, when I was trying to figure out who I was as a poet, I just want to thank you for guiding me in the right direction. I don't know if right, but in the direction I wanted to go with that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that anthology is very good. I mean, it was good to put together, and then I noticed that almost 90% of the poets in there are still writing, and they are poets, which is an amazing thing, because it was published in 1970, and it is now 50 years later, and people are still poets, which is a very strange and odd thing to be, for so long, or to do for so long, and believe in its powers. It's really a strange faith we're all in.
Yeah. I wonder if you could respond, Andrei, to this thought of Paul Valéry, because I'm reading an essay by him at the moment, and he says that a poet's function, do not be startled by this remark, is not to experience the poetic state. That is a private affair. His function is to create it in others. The poet is recognized, or at least everyone recognizes his own poet, by the simple fact that he causes his reader to become inspired.
Well, I mean, I think that seems a bit obvious. I don't know what Valerie was, exactly aiming at there. If it's certainly not a mystery that you want to create a poetic state in someone else, when you're reading, or a place of mystery or of trouble, that sets the mind puts the mind to work. Yeah, I mean, I had the quote from Valerie too at the beginning of a poem, which says something that I'm paraphrasing now, but he said, if you write a line of verse or something, you must be sure that you can live with it forever. And I thought, well, did he really have to say forever? I mean, that's a scary thing to say. It's almost a sort of a line that stops you from writing. You freeze, it's freeze forever. Any line that ends in forever, it just like paralyzes you.
I totally agree, Andrei. In fact, I'm kind of allergic to songs that use the word forever, particularly songs, because they're usually love songs, and I'm going to love you forever, baby. And that's why I really like this song, Keep Me in Your Heart for a While, which seems so much more realistic, let's face it.
More conditional, temporal. Yeah. A week could be, a while could be a week. 2 days, an hour. A year, it could be forever. Right. I mean, the 18th century was obsessed by love suicides, people who, died together, and that was forever, It was a sort of a romantic German notion of the Liebestod. I don't want my poems to do that to anybody, like Goethe's young Werther, which caused a rash of suicides across Europe.
This story when we met, you told me that incredible story about Siran and that effect that he had on the young woman. Would you mind retelling that? Because I think the Poetry Junkies would benefit from it.
Well, there's several. The story, I think the most significant story about Siran, was a Romanian-born French philosopher, but he wrote in Romanian as well. And Siran, when I met him, he refused to speak Romanian because he had completely left that language behind. And he said, I will not speak the barbarous language. So, but then he asked me where I was from, and I said I was from Sibiu, which is a very special place, because he was from there in Transylvania, German Hermannstadt. And he asked me where I was from, and I said Sibiu, and then he said in Romanian, oh, that's something else. So then we continued to speak Romanian. But then, in his last 2 years of life, he could only speak Romanian. His French disappeared from his brain. It was a very strange thing. It was a condition that he couldn't communicate or talk with his, love of many years, Simone, and, it was a very strange thing. He abandoned the Romanian language, but he ended up dying. He wrote it in French and he died in Romanian. So, the brain will do strange things like that. But, I think the story you're referring to probably was the one about one of his fans. He was very shy. He didn't like to be in public at all. But he had carried on correspondence with a number of people. And one of them was a great fan who wrote to him, who knew all his work and wanted to meet him. And then one day, actually, he accepted, to meet her, and he described his nervousness and his, combing his hair and putting on a nice shirt and waiting for this person to show up. And there was a knock at the door, and this woman, not particularly young or older, just a regular person, came in and they offered her a place to sit and then asked her, started talking nervously because she didn't say anything. And so after about 15 minutes of him making attempts at conversation, she stood up and he saw her to the door. And at the door, she turned around and said, "Now that I have met you, I have the courage to commit suicide." And he said, "I found myself at the door arguing against the philosophy of a lifetime, telling her not to do that because it's not a good idea. And I mean, you shouldn't do that. Certainly you shouldn't do that because you read my works." And but that was that. And I asked him what happened. Did he keep up with it? Did he follow up? And he just shrugged, which was very unpleasant to me, but odd, in many ways.
And following up
That's
on
the story I think you're referring to.
Andrei, like, what do you hope would be the young woman who knocks on your door and enters your apartment? What would you want your accumulative effect to be upon her?
Certainly not suicide. No, I mean, I don't, I mean, I thought enough. I mean, it's not nobody will knock at my door because first I have a completely private studio. Nobody knows the address. So. Old students get in touch now and then, but they do it by email. So if an email counts as a knock on the door, then yeah, I've had the door knocked on by various people. But, I mean, I don't have fans like rock people or singers or real popular figures. And I mean, these are writers and poets looking for some opinion, some companies, somebody to read their work. It's not. There is no danger, I don't think. Unless if I lived still in Romania and the communists are still in power, there would be some thrill of danger about the knock at the door.
You've got a fan base. Are you kidding?
I do.
Yeah, don't you think? I mean, you can't say that about yourself, I guess, but
Well, when I was on the radio, people,
Yeah.
I mean, I did some commentaries on NPR, so people.
I missed your NPR commentaries. I was going to ask you, is there any way you could do some more?
Well, NPR became a very big institution, and it has a very large building in Washington and a concert hall, and it's so mainstream and so mild mannered that I really didn't feel like I belonged there anymore.
But everybody can start a podcast. In fact,
Right.
I think you'd be great at that. I'm doing one right now called the Hive Poetry Collective in Santa Cruz and California. And I was going to reach out to Vincent anyway. So don't be surprised. Not that I'm asking you for your email because you sound very private, but I would love to interview you and Vincent about this piece.
Oh, sure. We'll be fine. We just did an interview for a publication called The Art Side, which is out of Atlanta. It's published by Dana Serlin, who's a painter. And sure.
Andrei, I think, as we've both experienced enough in this life, there's a shadow side to everything. So I like that you're bringing into the group the bright side of collaboration, but what are the shadows to collaboration in your experience?
Well, I don't know. You could probably speak to that if you can think of any. I mean, I usually find it a pleasant occupation. It's almost a necessary one, like in the pandemic, it's important to do that. But, mostly it was just an idea that when you feel, that you're certainly on a certain same frequency you begin to write. You know. What do you, have you had any experiences?
I mean, my experiences of collaboration have primarily been with songwriting, and I was usually working with either a composer or a singer. And I tended to lean towards the bright side. I mean, it's true. It felt like a kind of alchemical process, and in a good collaboration, we were both lifting each other to new heights. But of course, it was challenging, and there was definitely a sense. For instance, I was writing for a Polish Cuban singer, and she just couldn't pronounce some of the words that I was writing for her. She said, "I can't sing that, Lucian." So I had to, dig into synonyms or find, lyrical phrases that fit her voice. But finally, I was very happy and satisfied with the collaborations that I've been involved with. But I thought you have so much more experience. You might be able to give us a little taste of Shadow.
Well, it's very different because when you collaborate in music or in theater, you have to, create something together, whereas poetry, a lot of it will stay where it is. I left some of my best poems in bars, because it's not, I mean, what happens to this collaboration? I mean, at some point something might happen, but it's not, it doesn't have to come out perfect. It does. You're not working on it in the sense of creating work for either not even for publication. So it's just pleasure. But of course, I mean, I wrote theater. You write that, then you at some point your own writing sinks at the bottom of what is being made because you account for very little in a combination of actors and music and choreography and images and so on. So that's why in films you rarely even see if they ever know to the book that the film is based on. So. And it's probably right because very few films resemble the books that they came from.
Do you have any favorite, Andrei? Do you have any favorite book-film combination?
Well, that's a real good question. I don't think really great films, or I'm thinking books that became great films. I mean, I know that there's certain books that can never. I mean, they're constantly there are attempts to make them into films, and it doesn't work. On the road, for instance, there are about 9,000 scripts floating around, and it never became a very good film. And because you can't really translate the interior monologue very well, it's I don't think that Ulysses is a book. It was a tremendously fundamental book. Or Finnegan's Wake, for instance. I mean, how would you make a movie? Maybe it just it cannot be translated. I mean, it stays in its own. It's perfect. So.
Are there any great movies about poets, in your opinion, that you really liked?
No, I mean, actually, that movie with the Dead Poets Society, I thought was dreadful. And what else was there? I don't remember. What movies are you thinking about?
Bright Star, about Keats.
Oh.
Made me weep.
Oh, well, yeah, sure. I never saw it, but yeah.
Oh, okay. And then there was one
I saw his grave in Rome, that.
Oh my God, you did? I went to his house in Hampstead Heath and sobbed like a baby. It was mortifying. I didn't expect it, the emotion.
I recommend Wild Nights with Emily Dickinson, played by Molly Shannon, if you want a real sexual romp about Emily's life.
Oh, okay. Something to look forward to, I guess. I love her work, of course, but I think that's a poet that's very little, well, not little known, but was known mainly by critics until now, is Mina Loy, who is a tremendously interesting poet, because I think that She wrote most of her work in the 20s and 1930s, but did live quite longer than that. But she, if she had had the ambitions that Ezra Pound had or T.S. Eliot, she would have probably healed this ongoing rift in American poetry between the Poundians and the Eliotians. So her book, The Lunar Baedeker, is an extraordinary book of poetry, and there are two books about it, but you can never find actually a good collection of her collected works. There's the selected poems, but her longer poems are fantastic, and they're not in there.
Can you say a little more about this rift between the Poundians and the Eliotins? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Well, a very simple thing, Joe. I mean, I think Pound opened up the field, as it were, for the future poets to be. He used different languages and different, ideas in his poems. They're wide open, and they allow for thinking and for other poets. Whereas I think Eliot looked to the past, and said everything great happened in the past, and there's no hope of improvement, or there's no way to keep going forth. And so I think Eliot looks at the past, and Pound to the future, to be very simple about it. And this is outside their ideological problems, which obviously were there. So.
And how would Mina's work fix that rift or resolve it or bridge it?
Well, she was a good friend of many of the artists in Paris, and she was a good friend of Marcel Duchamp. She understood what the artists were doing, and her own work was inspired at the beginning by the Futurists, because she lived for a while with Marinetti, and Papini. Actually, she had an affair at the same time, both of them, and it was a very creative time, very powerful. And then she was an artist as well, and she was funny, and her very fine sense of irony was also transcendental at the same time. And she was like a very, it was her own kind of mystic and thinker at the same time. Her feminist manifesto, which is one of the earliest of anything called a feminist manifesto, is an amazing work. And then she ended up writing about the people she knew, like Marinetti and Pound, and she was this, it's satirical, but it's profoundly also a critique of entire philosophical traditions and modes of thinking. So, I can't, really. But I think would have been a bridge, because of her sense of humor. Because English poetry suffers from a lack of it. So there are not many, poets. I mean, we talk of maybe the Canterbury Tales. You have to go there to find funny stuff. But Mina Loa, she had a very interesting life, and she was very highly regarded. But she was published in the same issue of Transition, her poems, as T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, and both Pound and Eliot were great admirers of her poetry, but she didn't have that ambition to actually, make, bend the poetic wave her way, as Pound and Eliot apparently did.
I love her. It is ironic, don't you think, to have an affair with Marinetti, who's, speaking of manifestos on futurism, really kind of called for the demolition of the past, libraries, feminism. But I agree with you that her manifesto on feminism kind of like you had a, a combined rage and humor critiquing some of the forces I think that are behind that kind of techno-feudalism. And here she was kind of sleeping with an admirer of it, which is interesting, but with that same kind of sense of humor that kind of comes at these things more successfully than just the pure rage and manifesto voice.
Well, she's also there's a special kind of intelligence, I think, that was able to take these very hard and heavy notions of these poets and just play with them as if they're sort of easily seeable. I mean, she saw through them and she saw in them, and she was able to make her poems with it.
I think
I'm just thinking about oh, you can't hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
About Dada as an approach. I'm wondering if that is maybe an attempt to disintegrate the ego, because that just maybe hijacks a work.
Well, there is that whole Zen mystical side to it too. I mean, quite overtly, Tristan Tzara's later work, but yes, it was definitely an anti-art movement, and meaning by anti-art, meaning the authored canvas or the authored poem, and that a number of people could make it, and 10 people could overthrow an entire philosophical tradition or poetic tradition of many years. So yes, there was definitely that intention, to dissolve the ego. Although Tzara, after the World War, he became a member of the Communist Party, of the French Communist Party, and did a lot of work during the war and the French resistance, and so. But he kept writing poems that didn't have much to do with the politics at all, and or with Dada, for that matter. They're quite extraordinary. There's a poem from 1959 called L'Homme Approximatif, the approximate man, and it's a tremendous work, and it's very little read because his reputation as a founder of Dada overshadows that his poetry. But yeah.
Was it also a reference? Was it also maybe a reference to create some kind of authority over critics, some kind of equalizing the ground?
Well, I mean, in this, yes, because, basically all of the Dada work was a critique, was a critique of society, was a critique of the poetry that came before, and was a critique of civilization as it was understood in Europe, until they came along, and all through the First World War. And it was also a powerful, mostly pacifist revolt. Now, the German Dadaists are a lot more radical and a lot more political and closer to the communists and to the anarchists than the French Dada, which Tzara, was. What's that? I'm sorry, I think it froze your computer.
Yeah, she's frozen. I'll jump in for a moment, Andrei. I think your sense of humor, I mean, to me, that is definitely one of your most glowing qualities as a writer. And, just to quote a couple of the poems that you read today, the internet is a loaded gun in the hand of a 3-year-old. Everyone is sad. The rest is advertising. I mean, what do you think? I mean, what constitute? I mean, do you think about humor as I guess, again, to use a word that was raised earlier in the conversation, as a strategy? I mean, I think that personally, my own view of humor, quickly said, is that I think it's kind of a Trojan horse, because it allows very deep and very transformative weapons across people's borders. Because you cloak it in humor, and the defenses come down. But I'd love to hear your own thoughts about that.
No, I don't even think there's anything humorous about anything I write. I don't think humor exists, actually, because that's just, I mean, people find certain things funny because they're surprised by it. And to be surprised, one reaction to surprise is laughter, so you laugh because you've been surprised. But I don't think of it as something I use, and people say, how do you use humor? I mean, I don't think of it as a tool or anything. It's an intrinsic part of how I think, and I don't think it's a defense, and actually it does cut through a lot of bullshit, because, it's something you almost need now. It's necessary in this AI age, because that's one thing the AI doesn't have is humor. It doesn't, you can make a robot laugh or tell a joke correctly, So, but I don't think of, that it's just, it's part of how I think, or how, and I think in fact, I think all really terrific works of art or writing is funny. I mean, Kundera is, I mean, the Czechs don't have a tragic literature as per se. They have books that seem funny, actually. The characters of Hrabal, are tremendously amusing and funny, but they're profound at the same time, and they're very sad. So you have this in Romanian, there's a word called râsul plânsul, which means laughing, crying. It's one word they made out of it, râsul plânsul. And it's sort of like that. I mean, when you are laughing, you are also crying, because it touched on something very surprisingly true.
Yeah, Woody Allen has a phrase that I often think of, which is that humor is tragedy plus time.
That's pretty good.
Do you think I have a teacher that used to say no one can resist a short poem. You seem to have a great facility for that. I'm far away on that, from your point there, but I'm always trying to hack away, but once I get into it, I want to add in more a thing, a detour or something. So do you go back to your poems then, and then
yeah,
are they pretty set? And
no, I take a lot of notes on my iPhone now, and then when I print them out, and I try to figure out what I was trying to say. And that's, if you can remember what you meant when you wrote it, you'll want to think more about it. And I think a successful reading is like that too, because if you remember what you were thinking when you wrote that, then it's a very successful reading. But a lot of people just read as if they just saw it for the first time, and then they rely on a kind of sound rhetoric.
But they see the work for the first time. Is that what you're saying? When they reread it, is that what you mean?
No, I mean when they read it in public.
Yeah.
When you read it in public, I think you have to remember. Well, both when you read your notes, then you make a poem, and then when you read it out loud, then you have to remember what it was you meant when you wrote it. Because if you don't, it just doesn't. You'll be as baffled by it as everybody else.
That is really helpful. I remember trying to teach my students something about, how to give a good presentation or performance. And I gave them a little bit from Stanislavski, who said something similar, that you have to get into the subtext of whatever you're reading aloud, especially if it's written by someone else. But if it's written by you, the subtext of what you've written was the cry of the occasion. So that's taken a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
All right.
And Andrei, this Rhodes Scholar film, you told me a funny story about it. I mean, the fact is that the director promised you $50,000 and only paid you half.
Yeah.
But beside that fiasco, could you tell us a little bit about that film?
Well, the film started out as a bad idea, because this producer, who probably, I mean, I did it because of the money, and because he said that he'd pay me all that money, he didn't. And it was to take a car trip in a convertible in the middle of winter from New York to California. A 1967 Cadillac. And so I said, okay, well, that sounds like a painful thing, but I'm going to earn the money. So I got in, and then I changed the whole idea because I just came from Romania, where there was a revolution, so to speak, about in 1989 that overthrew the regime. And I was curious about these communities that were making small scale communism in America, and that have been there since the end of the 19th century, there during the Great Awakening. It was called all along this road that goes from New York City to all the way to Canada through Niagara Falls. There was the Oneida community, which practiced free love, and there was the Shakers, which didn't practice any any sexual things at all. They abstained from that. And then there are others, that are still there, like the Bruderhof community, which still exists, and it's very, very prosperous. And they're German pacifists who left Germany before World War One, and they made communities everywhere based on the basic communist principle of religious communism, of sharing everything. And their only problem was that they had gotten rich, and they didn't like that. So when they made more communities, and then if they have surplus, they shared everything. Surpluses were burnt at fires around Christmas time. So they were there. And so I decided I warped the movie to go to these places. And so we ended up making a kind of a visit to outside communities that are not living the way most Americans do in suburbs and cities.
And were you satisfied with the movie? Were you happy with it?
Oh yeah. The movie it was a lot of fun. I mean, I had an ally in the cameraman, the photographer, who was really tremendous. He's Jean de Segonzac. He was a French cameraman, and of course, the director and the producer was not happy with us at all. And when we arrived places that he had no phone connections, and he was very upset that he was away from his phone. So at some point, we actually hid his phone, and he drove him insane. So yeah. It's not a movie that's widely available because it was sold to Disney, and then somebody else bought it. They had another distributor, and I think Goldwyn Mayer actually, Goldwyn had it for a while, and now if you put it on the internet, it's been on YouTube a few times. It gets taken out by whoever owns it.
All my life, I had two places.
Okay.
So you can't find the whole movie online, but you can find a trailer on YouTube. Is that
Oh
it?
yeah, but that's very little. But I'll put it again on my website, and you can see it. But they'll probably get taken off pretty quickly.
That'd be cool.
I would love to show the film in our festival in Prague.
Okay, well, I have a copy. I have it.
Okay, so let's arrange that for next year. I would love that.
Okay, well, I was planning on coming.
My dad gave me a handgun when I was 5 years old. You just feel exhilarating.
We're having Dadaist intrusions. That's good. I'll try to figure out who that's coming from.
Welcome to the Little Whitechapel Drive-Up Wedding Window.
Okay, that's vanished. Good. Anybody else have a last comment or question? I think we're just about to wrap up. If no one does, then Andrei, could you?
No, I did have a question. It just occurred to me.
Great.
I'm sorry.
Please.
Andrei, who is writing exciting poetry now?
Alice Notley.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know her work, but I will look into it. Thank you.
Quite prolific, actually. She has a few books out.
She just has a new book with essays too. Can you remember the title of that? It just came out. Yeah.
And Andrei, have you taught much, and do you continue to teach?
Well, I taught enough, but I don't teach anymore. You know, I left. I taught at Louisiana State University for 25 years. But if you can call it teaching, yeah, it's called it.
Do you have any books that you recommend about poetry and about the art of poetry?
No, do you have one in your hand?
Yeah, I was
see
going to
you.
hold up Edward Hirsch's book, A Poet's Glossary. This I got in the States. I was so delighted to find a hardcover version because
No.
soft cover is annotated or less. It's somehow anyway. I really enjoy it, but I'm wondering if you have any recommendations in those in that.
Well, I wrote a book called A Poetry Lesson my last semester of teaching at LSU, and
Okay, I'll find it.
it's published by Princeton University Press.
Andrei, do you ever go to the New Orleans Poetry Festival? You know, Bill Lavender's thing. I performed there last year, and I'm thinking of going again next year because I fell in love with it. And
Oh, well, that's good.
I would spend the money to go maybe. If you were there, it's just really, I recommend it to everyone. It's April 18th through the 21st.
Yeah, I like what Bill did in Prague, you know, when he was doing it for the University of New Orleans, but I don't really like what he's doing now for this sort of pay to read thing, you know. I mean, you have to pay to do this. I mean, I'm used to, actually not used to, but it would be nice if they paid you to do this. You know, so.
$100, which reminds me, I forgot to cash my check. But yeah, that's not that much.
All right.
I loved when you said tonight, you just said it in passing, really, but you said that, you know, a poem is a place of mystery or trouble that sets the mind to work. And I love that conjunction of mystery and trouble, which I've never heard before. And it also struck me that it's almost, you know, on the other side of a polarity with Frost's idea that a poem should be a momentary stay against confusion. And you suggest with mystery or trouble, no, let's leap in, let's get confused.
Well, no, I mean, there are two things about that. There is a great, you know, Lucian Blaga, who said, when faced to the mystery, our job is not to explain it, but to increase its mysteriousness. And then the other, you know, it's a wonderful book called Staying with the Trouble. It's a book of environmental critique, you know, by, I can't remember the author's name. But it's who is it? Donna Hathaway, yeah.
Donna Haraway.
Haraway, right. That's a wonderful book. I just love it. And her whole, you know, work is about that, just staying with the trouble.
So, Andrei, could you be so kind and give us a poem to close?
Well, I'll give you a short poem since the word came about it. It's called Theories Are Fascist. The Greeks didn't make up their gods to serve Jung. Archetypes are the weaponization of gods for theory. That mess of gods and their weird stories served anybody who needed them for anything. The gods lived in disorder just like they're humans, got drunk and fucked each other with music. Jung's ordered the gods just march.
Thank you so much, Andrei. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it was great talking to everyone there. You know, you have a great group. You know, so this is a monthly thing.
It's kind of regularly irregular, but you know, we had a time we met every other week, and now it's about every month. But it's also because we're kind of focusing on trying to get people at your caliber. So it was just so gracious and kind of you to join us. Thank you so much. And I do hope
thank you.
The conversation and get you back to Prague.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll see you in Prague.